Hey, gang! In this quick video, I wanted to show you why I think the infamous case of the Enfield Poltergeist was a hoax, or a ghost impersonating another ghost. The Enfield Poltergeist is definitely the best documented case of haunting in the country, and it still divides opinion today. The event started in 1977 on Green Street, a quiet residential area of North London. It is in this peaceful, semi-detached, three-bedroom house that trouble started. The family living inside in the 70s was the Hodgson family. Peggy, the mother, and her 4 children. Margaret, 13 years old, Janet, 11, and the boys, Bill and John, a bit younger, although one of the boys was most of the time in boarding school. The house is a council accommodation. According to the family, objects were flying across the room, furnitures were moving, and tapping noises occurred. At first, the family called the police. The police turned up, and the police officers witnessed objects flying across the room. You can still find interviews of those police officers on the internet. But eventually, the police decided this was not police matter. They didn't know what to do. There was no evidence of any intruder. So the family, not knowing what to do, they called the press. The Daily Mirror sent a photographer. The photographer was hit by a flying Lego brick. He was bruised just over the eyebrows. Now, to be actually injured by a Lego brick, it had to have been thrown with such force. None of the kids seems to be doing it. The family was told that they should invite the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research. The first investigator to arrive was Maurice Grosse. Now, Maurice was a smart guy. He was originally an engineer. He's the one that invented the motorized advert billboard that we still use today. Not the type of guy that would be fooled by kids, you'd think. Maurice and the photographer stayed vigils through the night, and they could hear the tapping. A lot of the paranormal activity seemed to revolve around Janet, the 11 years old. She was allegedly thrown in the air by a paranormal force. The photographer decided to place a camera with a flash in the girl's bedroom with a cable linked to a remote control. So as he heard noises from downstairs, he could take pictures. This is the house number 284, Green Street. This is one of the infamous photographs taken that night. Now, little Janet was quite an athletic girl. One might argue that she was just jumping out of bed, although the photos were taken every few seconds and there's no photos of her getting ready for a jump. She was straight out of bed. But, the girls were a bit cheeky and they had been caught a few times trying to trick Maurice. They were just playful teenagers, though. It doesn't mean that everything was a hoax. By that point, Maurice Grosse decided it was too much to investigate on his own. He called another investigator, Lyon, Playfair. Playfair is the one that later on would write everything down in a book, This House is Haunted. Now, bear in mind those investigators were staying in the house for months and months. The neighbors, the Nottinghams, had been very helpful. And the family had some family members living a few doors down as well. This is the type of story where people say you'd have to be there to believe it. And to be fair, there have been many witnesses. Some of them had nothing to do with the family. There's a school across from the building. You can see the school on the right here. And there's a lollipop lady. If you are not from the UK and you don't know what a lollipop lady is, it's those ladies or gentlemen wearing a high visibility jacket helping the kids to cross over the street after school. That lady allegedly saw little Janet Horizontal. She was levitating. She saw her horizontally levitating through the window. And her friend was there. She saw the same. At some point, the investigators were trying to get the poltergeist to move objects. They agreed he was going to move a cushion from the bedroom to the top of the house on the roof. Now, the investigators were outside of the room. Only Margaret and Janet were inside, and the window was very difficult to open. A second later, the red cushion was on the roof. The girls had not opened the window. Or at least the investigators didn't hear it. Now, you'd think it could be a trick. Yes, it could be. But there's a random witness, a baker delivery guy that was delivering bread at the neighbors. He saw the cushion, the red cushion, appearing on the roof out of nowhere. Now, things started to get even weirder when the poltergeist was able to speak. At first, he would communicate by tapping. Maurice Grosse would ask him questions and tell him to tap the wall once for a no, twice for a yes. He would say, "Did you die in this house?" And eventually the ghost started talking through Janet. Was she just a very good ventriloquist? This is the question. We are now in Durrance Park, and let me play you the voice of the poltergeist. Now, he says here, I'm 72 years old, and I come from Durrance Park graveyard, also known as Hertford Road Cemetery. The cemetery is in Durrance Park. The transcript of the ghost is also stated in Playfair's book. This house is haunted. Now let me play it again. I'm 72 years old. I come from Durrance Park graveyard. Now we agree here, he definitely says I'm 72 years old and I come from Durrance Park graveyard. Well, the voice started to talk and talk and talk for hours. One might argue that it was Janet doing the voice, and it did come from Janet, although her lips were closed. It seemed to come from the back of her neck, apparently. The voice was swearing a lot. Quite bad swearing. If a child was pretending to be a ghost, they'll swear because they're not allowed to when it's them speaking. And then the ghost came out with a full identification of himself.
Whether you remember what happened to you when you died?
I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in a corner downstairs.
The voice clearly says, I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in a corner downstairs. Of course, a lot of people were very skeptical with those voices. They believed it was Janet doing it. But Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair did investigate. They gave Janet some water to keep in her mouth, they taped her lips. The voices were still coming. They asked her to say stuff that even the best ventriloquist would struggle with. Stuff like beer bottle. If I try to say beer bottle, it's gonna sound like I'm barking. Could it be Janet? Would an 11 years old have heard of an hemorrhage? Usually not, but I would argue that yes. If your old neighbor Fred had told you that someone died in your house and they died of an hemorrhage, you'd remember the term. You would. So the voice has clearly given three information. That he's 72 years old, that he's buried here in Durrance Park graveyard, and that he died due to an hemorrhage. Now, those recordings of the ghost voice were played in a BBC radio show. In those recordings, the ghost identified himself as Bill Wilkins. Young Janet had already started to draw a lot of weird pictures, scary pictures, and the name Wilkins would come back a lot in those drawings. A young man heard the radio show. His name was Terry Wilkins, and he claimed the voice was his dad's. He said his dad died at number 284 Green Street, and he died of a brain hemorrhage. So everyone was like, bingo! Suddenly the ghost was indeed a former resident that died indeed in his chair in a corner downstairs. That is true. He's not buried here though. This lovely graveyard is about a minute walk from the property. So if you were an 11 years old making up a story, you would assume that he was buried here. I'll take you to the place where he actually is buried. But to tell you the end of the story, eventually Janet was sent to the Maudsley Asylum in Denmark Hill, a psychiatric institution where she stayed for 6 weeks, as they were worried about her mental health. The mental health professionals, though, they said she was absolutely fine. The family was then struck by tragedy. One of the boys died as a teenage boy. Janet and her brother now live in Clacton-on-Sea, a location where they had been sent on a holiday at the time to go away from the happenings. Peggy, the mother, died at the age of 73 in 2003. She says she witnessed strange happenings until the end of her life in that house. She never felt alone. After that, a new family moved in, a mother and her children. The mother was interviewed and she said she was not afraid, not concerned by the ghost at all. The council had warned her that the house was haunted, but she did not mind. The family has not experienced any strange happenings, apart from people knocking at the door. That house is now so infamous that people knock at the door, they want to come inside. She says she's got people coming all over from China. It's probably one of the best documented hauntings in the world, to be honest. Apparently, she's had people knocking at the door at 3 a.m., expecting to be let in. Apparently, she even had to call the police on one occasion. Brave lady. So we are now in the beautiful Lavender Hill Cemetery. It's about 3 miles away. Now, it is here in this cemetery that the Bill Wilkins, living at 284 Green Street, was buried 3 miles away. And you know, this story is such a great story that sometimes people don't let the truth get in the way. Even the new BBC documentary released this month claimed that the guy was buried down the road. He's not. Down the road would be Durrance Park Cemetery, that is 200 yards down the road. Lavender Hill Cemetery is 55 minutes walk away. I've walked it. It's not down the road. Now, according to his book, This House is Haunted, Guy Lyon Playfair says that once the ghost had written on the bathroom wall with tape, "I am Fred." Fred was an old neighbor in the Nottingham house next door. He would have probably met Margaret and Janet. He died when Janet was 7. So surely the neighbor would have known that Bill Wilkins died in the property, in a sofa in the corner downstairs. Fred might not have known great details. He probably didn't know the exact location of the burial, so the girls didn't either. And he potentially did not know exactly the cause of death, because Bill, William, his full name, did not die of an hemorrhage. According to his death certificate, he died of a blood clot in the coronary artery at the age of 61, not 72, as the voice stated. I'm not the one that went and fetched the death certificate, by the way. I got it from a blogger called Roger J. Morgan, just to give him a bit of credit. As you can see, Lavender Hill Cemetery is a beautiful place. I wish I knew a bit more about some of the local residents here, so I could do a live stream from here one day. If you know any interesting stories about people buried here, do let me know in the comments. Now let's go and find William's grave. By the way, if people are watching from abroad, Bill is a nickname very often used for William. It might be obvious for some, but it's not actually obvious for foreigners. You know, like Peggy is Margaret, Dick is Richard. Why do you use those nicknames that have nothing to do with the name? It confuses foreigners. So I don't know about you, but if I moved into a new house and the neighbors had been there for many years, if they were nice and friendly, which we know the Nottingham were, I would definitely go and ask them who used to live in the property. Why did they leave? So I find it interesting that the Hodgson pretended they didn't know. I'm sure they would have asked Fred. Anyway, here is the grave. Treasured husband and father William Charles Wilkins died 20th of June 1962, age 61. Also, Ethel May Wilkins died 9 of April 1972, age 64. So, his wife was there. She would have come home from her shopping, finding her husband died in the corner on the sofa, and she would have told the neighbors, as you do. So that's why I think it was probably a hoax created by the girls, very talented girls, by the way. Or it was a ghost. There have been so many happenings in this house, and so many witnesses. Could it be a different spirit pretending to be Bill? Maybe. But would a different ghost know the truth? You'd think that when you die, you access a level of truth, and you'd know where Bill is buried anyway, even if you're not Bill. Who knows? Anyway, I know I'm a bit of a spectacle with this story, but let me show you something. When I edit the videos, I usually remove the background noises. If they are cars or noisy stuff that are not nice to listen to. If it's birds or animals or cute noises, I'll keep them, of course. Well, let me play the original sound that I recorded by the house. What is that? Now, there is a school not far. It could explain the kids' noises. If you wanted to see a bit more from me, do check out my live stream session. Most of what I do on YouTube, it's actually live streaming. Bye.